The Ark of the Covenant vanished from history without a single clue. This sacred chest, said to hold the power of God itself, disappeared from the biblical record over 2,500 years ago. Its whereabouts remain one of the world's most profound and enduring puzzles. By the end of this journey, you will understand the full scope of this ancient mystery and the incredible theories surrounding its fate. Was it hidden deep beneath Jerusalem by faithful priests, or does it rest in a guarded chapel in Ethiopia, shielded from the world? We will follow the trail of legends, from ancient texts to modern treasure hunters, piecing together a story that spans continents and millennia. What do you believe is the most compelling reason we are still searching for it today? Crafted from acacia wood and overlaid with pure gold, the Ark of the Covenant was far more than a simple chest. Its construction, detailed in the book of Exodus, was a divine blueprint. This sacred object measured approximately 3 3/4 feet long and 2 1/4 feet wide and high. But its most defining feature was the solid gold lid known as the mercy seat. From this lid, 2 magnificent cherubim, hammered out of a single piece of gold, faced one another with their wings outstretched and touching. This space between the cherubim was believed to be the very throne of God on earth, the point where the divine presence would manifest. Within this golden box rested the stone tablets inscribed with the 10 Commandments, the ultimate symbol of God's covenant with his people. But it also held other sacred items, Aaron's rod that miraculously budded and a golden pot of the heavenly food, manna. These were not just relics, they were powerful reminders of divine provision and authority. The Ark served as the physical heart of communication between God and the Israelites, a conduit for his voice and a terrifying instrument of his power. It was a symbol of a direct, tangible connection to the divine, making its sudden disappearance from the historical record all the more profound. This golden chest was not merely a symbol, it was a vessel of raw and terrifying power. Its presence alone could alter the very landscape. When the priests carrying the ark stepped into the waters of the Jordan River, the flow ceased entirely, piling up in a heap many miles away to allow the entire nation of Israel to cross on dry ground. Later, it was the ark that led the procession around the mighty walls of Jericho. For 6 days it circled the city, and on the 7th, with a great shout from the people and the blast of trumpets, those formidable walls crumbled into dust. The ark was the engine of that miracle, a divine weapon that could topple empires. But this power was not a gentle force to be commanded. It was a sacred current that demanded absolute respect. The story of Uzzah provides a chilling example. As the ark was being transported on an ox cart, the oxen stumbled. Uzzah, a well-intentioned man, reached out his hand to steady the sacred object and prevent it from falling. The moment he touched it, he was struck dead. This was not a punishment for malice, but a stark demonstration that the ark was not an ordinary artifact. It operated under divine laws that humanity could not fully comprehend. To touch it without the proper sanctity was to invite disaster. This combination of world-shaping power and deadly consequence established the ark as far more than a religious relic. It was the physical embodiment of a covenant, a binding agreement between the divine and humanity, and its power was as absolute as it was unpredictable. For centuries, the terrifying power of the ark had a home. It found its ultimate sanctuary in the heart of Jerusalem, within the magnificent first temple built by King Solomon. This was not just a building, it was a cosmic focal point designed to house the divine presence on earth. Deep within the temple's innermost chamber, a windowless, perfect cube known as the Holy of Holies, the ark rested in profound darkness. Only one person, the high priest, was permitted to enter this space, and only on one day of the year, the Day of Atonement. He would come with incense smoke billowing to shield his eyes from a direct view of the divine glory, and with the blood of a sacrifice to atone for the sins of the people. The Ark was the central point of this entire ritual, the very seat of God's judgment and mercy. This period marked a golden age of stability for the Ark. No longer carried into battle or transported on carts, it was seemingly secure, the unchanging heart of a nation's identity and worship. The political and spiritual unity under Solomon's reign provided a shelter that felt permanent. But this stability was fragile, built on a foundation that would soon crack. The Grand Kingdom would fracture in two, setting the stage for a chain of events that would plunge the Ark into an eternal mystery. What could possibly threaten such a divinely protected object in its own sacred fortress? The golden age of Solomon's temple could not last forever. That fragile peace shattered as the kingdom fractured into two rival states, Israel in the north and Judah in the south. The glory of Jerusalem faded, and the city became a prize fought over by rising empires. Then came the hammer blow. In the year 587 before the Common Era, the seemingly invincible Babylonian army, under the command of King Nebuchadnezzar II, laid siege to Jerusalem. For months, the city endured unimaginable hardship, its walls finally breached by the relentless enemy. The Babylonians then systematically dismantled the heart of the Jewish nation. Solomon's magnificent temple, the very house of God, was torn down stone by stone and set ablaze. The city walls were broken and the royal palace was destroyed. The leading citizens, the skilled craftsmen, and the warriors were all taken as captives to Babylon, leaving behind only the poorest to work the land. This was a calculated act of cultural annihilation designed to erase a people's identity, and here the historical record presents us with a deafening silence. The Babylonians were meticulous record keepers, especially when it came to plunder. Ancient clay tablets list in exquisite detail the vast treasures they looted from the temple. They catalog golden bowls, silver censers, and other sacred vessels, item by precious item. But in all these inventories, there is not a single mention of the most valuable object of all, the Ark of the Covenant. It simply vanishes from the pages of history. How could the single most important religious artifact, the very throne of God, go completely unrecorded? Did the Babylonians simply overlook it in the smoke and rubble? Or was it already gone before the first Babylonian soldier ever set foot inside the Holy of Holies? This silence is the first and greatest clue in a mystery that has lasted for millennia. This profound silence from the Babylonian records has given rise to the most enduring theory of all. Perhaps the Ark was never captured because it was never there to be found. The idea is that pious priests, seeing the unstoppable Babylonian war machine advancing toward Jerusalem, took desperate measures to protect their most sacred charge. They would have known the fate that awaited other conquered cities and their temples, the systematic looting and desecration of everything holy. So, under cover of darkness, they performed one final solemn duty. According to this legend, they descended deep beneath the Temple Mount itself, into a labyrinth of natural caves and man-made tunnels, and there, in a secret chamber carved from the living rock, they concealed the Ark of the Covenant for safekeeping. This was not a hasty act of burial, but a deliberate, sacred interment, meant to last only until the danger had passed and the temple could be rebuilt. But the danger never truly passed, and the secret of its location may have died with those few guardians. The Temple Mount is not a solid foundation, it is a honeycomb. Over centuries, it has been filled with ancient cisterns to collect rainwater, subterranean passageways, and forgotten chambers. Some of these spaces are immense, large enough to hold buildings. One particular tunnel, known as Warren's Shaft after the explorer who mapped it, shows evidence of being a sophisticated water system from the time of the kings. Could one of these dark, silent voids be the final resting place of the Ark? The most compelling part of this theory involves the very foundation stone at the heart of the Dome of the Rock, the mosque that now stands on the Temple Mount. Jewish tradition holds that this was the site of the Holy of Holies, the exact spot where the Ark once rested. Directly beneath this stone is a natural cave known as the Well of Souls. To those who believe the Ark is hidden below, this is the most logical and powerful location imaginable. It would have been the most secure and symbolically appropriate hiding place, right under the footprint of its own altar. The thought is breathtaking that mere meters below where thousands of people walk every day, the most sought-after artifact in human history could be waiting in perpetual darkness, its secret guarded by stone and time. This hidden chamber theory, however, collides with the stark realities of the modern world. The Temple Mount is not an open archaeological site. It is one of the most volatile and sacred pieces of land on earth. Known to Muslims as the Haram al-Sharif, or Noble Sanctuary, it houses the Dome of the Rock and the Al-Aqsa Mosque. For Muslims, this is the place from which the Prophet Muhammad ascended to heaven. For Jews, it is the site of their ancient temples. This overlapping sanctity makes any physical investigation beneath the surface a geopolitical and religious minefield. The political sensitivity is so intense that even the most basic archaeological survey can ignite international incidents. So, while the theory of the Ark resting in a secret chamber is compelling, the ground above it is effectively sealed by faith, conflict, and diplomacy. We are left with a profound and frustrating paradox. The most likely hiding place is also the one place on Earth we cannot realistically search. Imagine knowing the answer to a mystery is locked in a room, but the key has been thrown into an ocean of contention. This impasse has naturally pushed the search for the Ark in a completely different direction, far from Jerusalem, across a continent to a legend of a different kind. Another possibility sends the Ark on a journey south, carried by desperate refugees fleeing the Babylonian onslaught. The theory suggests that the prophet Jeremiah, foreseeing the temple's destruction, orchestrated a daring mission to rescue the sacred object. He would not have taken it to just any hiding place, but to a known refuge, a community of Jewish people already established in a distant land, Egypt. This was not a random flight. It was a calculated escape to a place with deep historical ties to the Israelites. A specific destination often mentioned is the island of Elephantine in the Nile River. Here, a thriving Jewish military colony had built its own temple, a fact confirmed by ancient papyri discovered there over a century ago. This temple even performed sacrifices to the God of Israel, a startling parallel to the worship in Jerusalem. It seems like the perfect sanctuary, a ready-made fortress of faith to receive the most holy relic. Yet, this is where the theory encounters its greatest obstacle. The Elephantine papyri are remarkably detailed, recording everything from marriage contracts to lists of temple donations. They even describe the destruction of their own temple by a rival Egyptian faction and their subsequent plea for help to rebuild it. In all these extensive day-to-day records, there is not a single word, not even a hint about the Ark of the Covenant residing in their midst. How could such a monumental event, the arrival of God's throne on earth, go completely unmentioned in their own correspondence? The silence from Elephantine is as profound as the silence from Babylon. If the Ark was there, its presence was a secret so well kept that it left no trace in the very community tasked with its protection. A secret that has endured for 2,500 years without a single leak or legend emerging from the Egyptian sands. Yet one story shines brighter than all the others, a legend of epic scale that claims to know the Ark's exact location. It is not hidden in a dark tunnel or lost in the desert, but enshrined in a chapel in the ancient city of Axum, Ethiopia. This is not a secret whispered by a few, but a national tradition held sacred for centuries. The story begins not with a desperate flight from Babylon, but with a royal romance a world away. According to the Ethiopian epic, the Kebra Nagast, the legendary queen of Sheba, traveled to Jerusalem to witness the wisdom of King Solomon. Their meeting resulted in a son, Menelik I, who would become the first emperor of Ethiopia and found a royal line that lasted for millennia. When Menelik came of age, he journeyed to his father's court in Jerusalem, but upon his return to Ethiopia, the story takes a dramatic turn. He did not go home alone. His traveling companions, sons of the Israelite nobles, grew discontent, and in a secret act of devotion, they switched the real Ark of the Covenant with a perfect replica they had crafted. They smuggled the true Ark out of the temple and carried it with Menelik back to his homeland. In this version of events, the Ark did not vanish in a crisis of destruction, but was deliberately and peacefully relocated under divine guidance, establishing a new Zion far from the political turmoil of Jerusalem. Imagine the journey, a caravan crossing harsh deserts and rugged mountains, its members guarding the most powerful object in the world, completely unaware that they were altering the course of sacred history. This was not a theft, but a transfer of divine favor, a new covenant for a new land. Today, the tradition holds that this very Ark resides within a single chapel in Axum, the Chapel of the Tablet, which stands beside the ancient church of Our Lady Mary of Zion. It is guarded by one man, a solitary monk who dedicates his entire life to its protection. He is the only person permitted to see it, and he serves until his death when a new guardian is appointed. No emperor, no foreign dignitary, no journalist has ever been allowed inside to verify the claim. The power of this story lies not in proof but in unshakable faith. For millions of Ethiopian Orthodox Christians, the Ark's presence is not a theory, it is a foundational truth. It is the heart of their national identity and their spiritual life. The city of Axum is for them the New Jerusalem, and the Ark's divine presence sanctifies the entire land. This is a living, breathing tradition, not a dusty archaeological hypothesis. It raises a profound question: is the truth of a sacred object defined by historical evidence, or by the unwavering belief of those who guard it? The Kebra Nagast, Ethiopia's national epic, weaves a tale of divine destiny and royal intrigue. It recounts the journey of the Queen of Sheba to the court of King Solomon, a meeting that resulted in the birth of a son, Menelik. When Menelik came of age, he traveled from Ethiopia to Jerusalem to meet his legendary father. Solomon received him with great honor, but when the time came for Menelik to return home, a profound deception was set into motion. The young nobles who had accompanied Menelik, sons of the priests and elders of Israel, were so devoted to the Ark and the God of Israel that they could not bear to be parted from its presence. They conceived a daring plan. With the secret consent of the high priest Azariah, they crafted a perfect replica of the Ark of the Covenant. Under the cover of the temple's rituals and the palace's distractions, they switched the replica for the genuine artifact. The true Ark was smuggled out of the Holy of Holies and carefully prepared for the long journey south. Menelik, upon learning of the switch, was initially troubled, but a vision revealed to him that this was not an act of theft, but the will of God, transferring his covenant to a new land and a new people. The caravan departed Jerusalem, carrying not just a king's son, but the physical throne of God, its divine power hidden from the world. This journey, fraught with the perils of desert and mountain, was protected by the very presence they carried. The Kebra Nagast describes how the Ark miraculously levitated, guiding the travelers and allowing them to cover in one day a distance that normally took 3 months. It was a procession led by the divine, not by man. Upon their triumphant arrival in Axum, the Ark established a new spiritual center for the nation. Menelik was crowned king, founding the Solomonic dynasty that would rule Ethiopia for nearly 3,000 years, with its emperors claiming direct descent from the union of Solomon and Sheba. The Ark's presence in Axum was more than a relocation of a relic. It was the fulfillment of a prophecy and the birth of a new Zion. This story answers the historical silence with a narrative of purposeful transfer, not tragic loss. It transforms the mystery from a question of where the Ark was lost to a declaration of where it was found. its power not vanished but actively sanctifying a new promised land. This unbroken tradition challenges the very nature of historical proof, standing firm on the foundation of faith that has defined a nation for centuries. The heart of this enduring legend beats within a small, unassuming chapel in Axum. This is the Chapel of the Tablet, a structure that stands beside the more famous Church of Our Lady Mary of Zion, and it is said to be the final earthly dwelling of the Ark itself. The sacred object is not watched over by a committee or a rotating guard, but by one man. A single monk is chosen for this ultimate vocation, a guardian who dedicates his entire life, from the moment of his appointment until his last breath, to the Ark's protection. He lives within the chapel grounds, never leaving its side, his existence a perpetual vigil of prayer and watchfulness. His identity is known only to a few, and his life is one of extreme seclusion and devotion. When he dies, another monk is selected to take his place, ensuring an unbroken chain of guardianship that stretches back, according to tradition, for centuries. This is not a duty taken lightly, it is a divine calling that defines a human life. The chapel itself is strictly off limits to all outsiders. No foreign researcher, no curious tourist, no head of state has ever been permitted to enter and verify the Ark's presence. This absolute prohibition is not meant to be secretive but protective, a measure to shield the artifact's immense holiness from a profane world. This deep reverence extends far beyond the walls of that one chapel. In every Ethiopian Orthodox church throughout the country, you will find a replica of the Ark known as a tabot. These tabots are not mere decorative symbols, they are considered to be the direct, consecrated representatives of the original Ark. They are kept in the church's own Holy of Holies, veiled from public view, and are only brought out for the most important religious festivals. For the faithful, the spiritual power of the original Ark in Axum radiates outward, sanctifying each and every tabot in every church. The entire nation, in a very real sense, is living under the covenant of the Ark. This creates a powerful duality, where the one true Ark is hidden in absolute secrecy, while its spiritual essence is accessible to millions every single day. The guardian in his chapel is not just protecting a golden box, he is anchoring a faith that defines a nation. Yet this profound faith stands in stark contrast to the quiet skepticism of the academic world. The Ethiopian claim, while deeply compelling on a cultural level, faces significant historical and archaeological challenges. The most immediate question is one of timing. The Kebra Nagast, the very text that lays out the entire story of Menelik and the Ark's journey, was compiled in its current form around the 14th century of the Common Era. That is more than 2,000 years after the reign of Solomon and the supposed transfer of the Ark. This does not mean the story has no ancient roots, but it places its definitive written form long after the events it describes, leaving room for legend to have solidified into official history. Furthermore, the historical timeline creates a puzzling overlap. If Menelik took the Ark during Solomon's reign, which traditionally ended around 930 before the Common Era, then the Ark would have been safe in Ethiopia for centuries before the Babylonians ever destroyed the temple in 587. This raises a difficult question. If the Ark was already gone, why does the biblical narrative of the temple's later history, including its restoration, contain no mention of its most vital component being mysteriously absent? The priests would have been conducting the sacred rituals in the Holy of Holies before an empty space, a theological and practical problem that goes unaddressed in the historical texts. Then there is the issue of verification. The absolute prohibition against anyone seeing the Ark in Axum means its presence is an article of faith, not a fact that can be empirically confirmed. No independent scholar, no carbon dating, no material analysis has ever been performed. For historians who rely on evidence that can be examined and peer-reviewed, the Ethiopian Ark remains in the realm of powerful tradition rather than verifiable history. But to dismiss it on these grounds alone is to miss its true significance. The belief in the Ark's presence is the bedrock of Ethiopian identity. It connects the nation directly to the root of Judeo-Christian tradition, establishing an ancient and independent lineage of faith. This is not just a story they tell, it is a story that tells them who they are. It has fueled art, music, liturgy, and national pride for centuries. So we are left with a choice between two different kinds of truth, one based on physical evidence and historical documentation, and another based on unbroken faith and its power to shape a civilization. This very tension forces us to look elsewhere, to a theory that attempts to bridge the gap between faith and forensics by placing the Ark on a completely different continent. There is another, far more pragmatic possibility, one that requires no secret tunnels or epic journeys. The Ark of the Covenant may have met the most mundane and final of fates. It could have been captured by the Babylonian army, stripped of its sacred significance, and melted down for its weight in gold. This theory is stark in its simplicity. The Babylonians were not theologians, they were conquerors and accountants. Their records meticulously list the golden and silver vessels taken from the temple because these items had tangible material value. They were inventory, loot to be counted, transported, and added to the royal treasury in Babylon. The Ark, for all its divine power in the eyes of the Israelites, would have been, to a Babylonian soldier or scribe, just another box made of gold. Its intricate cherubim and its unique construction would have meant nothing compared to the pure, malleable, precious metal it contained. The process would have been brutally efficient. The wooden core would have been pried away and discarded, the golden plates and statues smashed and bundled together with other spoils. In the heat of a Babylonian smelter, the throne of God would have been reduced to a liquid, anonymous ingot. Its history, its sanctity, everything that made it the Ark would have been vaporized in the fire. This explains the profound silence in the Babylonian chronicles with chilling clarity. Why would they record the destruction of a single golden box when they were cataloging an entire kingdom's wealth? It was not a noteworthy event, just another day's work for the smelters. This idea is often overlooked precisely because it is so unromantic. It offers no hidden treasure, no divine guardian, no hope of recovery. It is an ending, not a mystery. The thought that an object of such immense spiritual power could be so utterly annihilated, its physical form erased from existence by sheer greed, is a difficult and sobering conclusion. It forces us to confront the possibility that some historical losses are permanent, and that the most powerful forces in human history are not always divine, but are sometimes devastatingly, tragically human. But perhaps the most radical theory of all sends the Ark on a journey not to the north or east, but deep into the heart of southern Africa. This is the hypothesis championed by scholar Tudor Parfitt, a story that connects a lost tribe of Israel to a sacred object that is not a golden chest but a powerful drum. The focus of this theory is the Lemba people, an ethnic group scattered across Zimbabwe and South Africa. For centuries, the Lemba have maintained oral traditions and cultural practices that set them apart from their neighbors. They observe strict dietary laws similar to kosher, they practice ritual animal slaughter, and they have a deep-seated belief that their ancestors were a group of white men who came from a place called Sina, a location many identify with ancient Judea. Their very identity is intertwined with a story of a long, arduous migration from the Middle East, a journey led by a sacred object they call the Ngoma Lungundu. This was not merely a ceremonial drum, but a vessel of immense power described as a voice of God that could guide their path, protect them in battle, and even strike down their enemies with fire. Parfitt, after years of fieldwork and genetic testing that revealed a high frequency of the Cohen modal haplotype, a genetic marker common among Jewish priestly lineages within Lemba men, began to piece together a startling possibility. He proposed that the Ngoma Lungundu was not just a symbol, but a direct descendant or a transformed memory of the Ark of the Covenant itself. He theorized that the original Ark was destroyed or lost, perhaps during the Babylonian siege, but that its essence, its core function as a mobile divine weapon and communication device, was preserved. A new object, a drum, was constructed to house this sacred power, becoming the new focus of a migrating people's covenant with God. This object was then carried on an epic journey south across the African continent by the ancestors of the Lemba. The theory reached its most dramatic point when Parfit was led to a storeroom in a Harare museum. There, he found the remains of an ancient, shattered wooden drum, blackened by fire and age. The Lemba elders identified these fragments as the last physical remnant of the Ngoma Lungundu. Radiocarbon dating placed the wood at around the year 1350, a date that, while far later than the Babylonian exile, fits within the timeline of the Lemba's own migration stories. For Parfit, this was not the Ark of the Covenant in its biblical form, but its spiritual and functional successor, the Ngoma Lungundu, the drum of God that had guided his people to a new promised land. This theory challenges every preconceived notion of the Ark. It suggests that the object was not a static relic to be hidden away, but a living, evolving concept. Its power was not confined to gold and acacia wood, but could be transferred, its purpose adapted to a new culture and a new journey. The Ark, in this view, was not lost but transformed, its story continuing in the songs and the sacred history of a people an ocean away from its origin. The story of the Lemba people offers a different kind of evidence, one written not on parchment but in bloodlines and memory. For generations, they have preserved a powerful oral history that starkly distinguishes them from their neighbors across Zimbabwe and South Africa. They speak of a great migration, a journey from a distant northern land called Sina, a place many researchers now associate with a location in ancient Judea or Yemen. Their cultural practices are a mosaic of clues, including strict dietary laws that forbid eating pork or mixing meat with milk, and a tradition of ritual slaughter that echoes ancient Israelite customs. Central to their identity is the story of a sacred object they carried on their long trek, the Ngoma Lungundu. This was no ordinary drum. Their traditions describe it as the voice of God itself, a vessel of terrifying power that could guide their path, protect them in battle, and even emit fire to destroy their enemies. It was carried on poles and was so holy that only a special priesthood could approach it, a direct parallel to the biblical descriptions of the Ark. This was not a passive relic, but an active, divine force that forged their identity as a people on the move. The sheer consistency of these traditions, passed down through countless generations, presents a compelling narrative, but in the modern era, a new kind of testimony emerged, one that could be measured in a laboratory. Geneticists began studying the Lemba, focusing on the Y chromosome, which is passed from father to son largely unchanged. The results were startling. A significant proportion of Lemba men carry a specific genetic marker known as the Cohen modal haplotype. This marker is particularly common among Jewish populations, especially among the Kohanim, the priestly class believed to be descended from Aaron, the brother of Moses. This genetic signature provides a scientific, tangible link to the ancient Middle East, powerfully corroborating their oral histories of a Semitic origin. The convergence of DNA and tradition creates a formidable argument. It suggests that the Lemba's ancestors were indeed a group with deep Israelite roots who undertook an epic journey, guided and defined by a sacred object whose description is hauntingly familiar. This medieval theory shifts the Ark's journey from ancient priests to warrior monks. The Knights Templar, an order of crusading knights founded in the early 12th century, were granted their headquarters on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, directly atop the ruins of Solomon's Temple. For nearly 2 decades, they conducted extensive excavations beneath the stables of the Al-Aqsa Mosque, an area they called the Solomon Stables. What were these devout and secretive men searching for in the foundations of the ancient world? Proponents of this idea believe they were not digging for conventional treasure, but for sacred relics of unimaginable power, and according to this legend, they found it. They uncovered the Ark of the Covenant, hidden in a subterranean chamber exactly where the old Jewish traditions had always claimed it would be. Realizing the immense spiritual and political weight of their discovery, they did not announce it to the world. Instead, they secretly transported the Ark back to Europe, safeguarding it from the chaos of the Holy Land. This single act would have transformed the Templars from a military order into the guardians of the ultimate divine relic, a secret that could have fueled their rapid rise to become one of the most powerful and wealthy organizations in medieval Europe. Their sudden influence and mysterious rites have long been attributed to a profound secret knowledge, and what knowledge could be more profound than the custody of God's own throne? The legend suggests the Ark became the source of their power and the root of their eventual downfall, a secret so dangerous it had to be protected at all costs. But where could they possibly hide an object of such magnitude? The trail leads to two of history's most enigmatic sites. The first is the tiny village of Rennes-le-Château in the French Pyrenees. In the late 19th century, a parish priest named Béranger Saunière suddenly and inexplicably became immensely wealthy, funding lavish renovations to his church with mysterious sources of income. He left behind strange codes in his renovations and was rumored to have discovered a secret hidden by the Templars, a treasure of both material and spiritual wealth. Could this have been the final resting place of the Ark, guarded for centuries by a local lineage of protectors? The other compelling location is Rosslyn Chapel in Scotland, a masterpiece of stone carved with symbolism that seems to defy its time. Its intricate pillars are entwined with carvings of maize and aloe vera, plants native to the Americas decades before Columbus's voyage. This has fueled speculation that the Templars, possessing ancient secrets, reached the New World long before other Europeans. More importantly for our story, the chapel's architecture is filled with imagery that some interpret as Jewish and Templar symbolism, leading to theories that its most famous feature, the apprentice pillar, is not just a column but a sealed container, a stone representation of the Ark itself, or perhaps even a marker for the real artifact hidden deep within a vault below the chapel floor. These locations have become the focal points for modern treasure hunters, their very names synonymous with mystery. The idea of Templar guardianship weaves the Ark into a tapestry of Western esoteric tradition, linking biblical history to medieval conspiracy and modern intrigue. It transforms the Ark from a lost relic of the ancient Near East into a hidden force that may have secretly shaped the course of European history, its power echoing not from a desert tomb but from a sealed chamber beneath a European chapel. The sheer scale of their excavations beneath the Temple Mount was unprecedented for its time. These warrior monks were granted permission to use the stables of the Al-Aqsa Mosque as their headquarters, a site they knew was the historic location of Solomon's Temple. For years, they dug not for gold or jewels in the traditional sense, but for something far more profound. They were searching for the foundational relics of their faith, and their efforts were rewarded with staggering success, though not in the way the outside world ever understood. Their sudden, meteoric rise from a small band of 9 knights to an international banking and military superpower has fueled speculation for centuries. Where did this immense wealth and influence come from? One compelling theory suggests it was not just from donations or savvy finance, but from the spiritual authority granted by a single, earth-shattering discovery. The Templars became the guardians of a secret so powerful it had to be concealed behind layers of ritual and symbolism. Their most sacred battle flag, the black and white bowseat, was more than a rallying point. Some researchers propose it was a symbolic representation of their greatest treasure. The stark contrast of black and white could have signified the duality of the Old and New Testaments, now unified by their possession of the ultimate covenant object, the Ark itself. It was a banner under which they were invincible, a fact their enemies often attested to on the battlefield, as if the knights were fighting with a divine wind at their backs. Even more enigmatic is their later, controversial veneration of a mysterious head, often referred to in their trial confessions as Baphomet. While later occult traditions distorted this figure to the Templars, this head may not have been an idol at all. Could it have been a coded reference to the mercy seat of the Ark, the space between the cherubim where the voice of God was heard? Or perhaps it was a reliquary containing a fragment of the stone tablets, the very words of God given to Moses. Their secret ceremonies, which so baffled and horrified their accusers, might have been rituals centered not on demon worship, but on the direct, unmediated power of the Ark of the Covenant. This possession would explain their fanatical devotion and their absolute conviction that they served a higher purpose than kings or popes. They were not just soldiers, they were the chosen guardians of God's throne on earth, a truth they carried to their graves when the order was violently dissolved. Their secret, if it ever existed, may have died with them, or perhaps it was smuggled away to one of their many preceptories, hidden in plain sight, waiting for a time when the world was ready to understand its power. But what if the Ark was hidden not by priests, but by a prophet on direct orders from God? This theory finds its roots in a text that stands just outside the traditional Hebrew Bible, the Deuterocanonical book of 2nd Maccabees. Here we find a brief but astonishingly specific account. The story recounts that the prophet Jeremiah, warned by a divine message, took the Ark of the Covenant and the tabernacle and carried them away to a cave on Mount Nebo. This was not a panicked flight from the Babylonians, but a deliberate, holy act of concealment. After sealing the cave, Jeremiah declared that the location would remain unknown until the time when God would finally gather his people together again, a moment of ultimate restoration and peace. The power of this story lies in its precision. Mount Nebo is a real and powerfully symbolic mountain in modern-day Jordan. It is the very place from which Moses was granted a view of the promised land he would never enter. For the Ark to be hidden there creates a profound narrative symmetry, linking the great lawgiver with the great prophet in a final act of safeguarding the covenant. Imagine the scene, a solitary figure ascending that sacred slope, bearing the immense weight of his people's most sacred trust, guided by a voice only he could hear. This was not about hiding an object from an enemy, but about preserving a promise for a future generation. The cave was not meant to be found by treasure hunters, but to be revealed by God at the appointed hour. This transforms the Ark's disappearance from a historical tragedy into a theological certainty, its absence a guarantee of its eventual return. Yet this compelling story is also fraught with challenges. The account in 2nd Maccabees was written centuries after the events it describes, and its historical accuracy is debated. Furthermore, why would such a momentous event, the divinely ordained hiding of the Ark, be absent from the primary biblical narrative of Jeremiah's own book? If this was the true fate of the Ark, its secret was kept so perfectly that even the most detailed records of the time make no mention of it. The silence is once again deafening. And Mount Nebo itself, while a defined location, is a vast and rugged landscape. Generations of pilgrims have stood on its summit, looking out across the Jordan Valley, wondering if the answer to one of history's greatest mysteries lies hidden in the rocks beneath their feet, waiting not for a map but for a miracle. Mount Nebo rises from the Jordanian landscape not as a jagged peak, but as a long, rolling ridge, a silent sentinel overlooking the vast expanse of the Dead Sea and the distant hills of Jerusalem. This is far more than just a possible hiding place. It is a location saturated with biblical finality. It was here, according to the book of Deuteronomy, that Moses stood after leading the Israelites for 40 years through the wilderness, granted a view of the promised land he would never enter. The symbolism is almost overwhelming, the great lawgiver's final act intertwined with the potential resting place of the very covenant he helped establish. For centuries, this powerful association has drawn pilgrims and archaeologists to its slopes. The summit is crowned with the ruins of a Byzantine church and monastery, built in the 4th century to commemorate the site of Moses' death. Early Christian mosaics, some of the most beautiful and well-preserved in the region, still decorate the floors, depicting scenes of hunters and animals, a vibrant testament to the site's enduring sanctity. Excavations over decades have revealed a complex of baptismal fonts, monks' cells, and chapels, all speaking to a long and vibrant tradition of worship. And beneath the rocky terrain, the mountain is pockmarked with natural caves and ancient tombs. Archaeologists have meticulously surveyed many of these cavities, some showing signs of human habitation dating back millennia. Yet, in all this digging, amid the stones that have witnessed so much prayer and pilgrimage, no evidence of the Ark has ever come to light. The silence here is different from the political impasse of Jerusalem or the quiet faith of Axum. It is the silence of an empty cave, a puzzle without a physical key. The very power of the Mount Nebo theory, its profound narrative perfection, is also its greatest weakness. If the Ark was hidden here on divine instruction, then it was meant to remain hidden, its secret guarded not by man, but by the mountain itself and the God who commanded its concealment. This leaves us standing on that windswept ridge, looking out at the same view Moses saw, wondering if the answer is literally beneath our feet, forever just out of reach. This silence from ancient sites has not deterred modern seekers, who now arm themselves with technology instead of shovels. The late 20th century saw a surge in self-styled archaeologists and explorers claiming to have solved the mystery, none more controversial than Ron Wyatt. An amateur archaeologist from the United States, Wyatt made a series of extraordinary announcements in the 1980s and 90s. His most stunning claim was that he had found the Ark of the Covenant buried in a cave system directly beneath the very spot where Jesus was crucified, the hill of Golgotha just outside Jerusalem's ancient walls. He described a dramatic scene of discovering a hidden chamber where the Ark rested, its lid spattered with what he believed was the dried blood of Christ shed from the cross above. This narrative tied the Old and New Testaments together in a powerful, almost cinematic way, suggesting the Ark was not just preserved but had played a silent, hidden role in the central event of Christianity. Unsurprisingly, Wyatt's claims were met with intense skepticism from the academic and scientific communities. He provided no verifiable evidence, no photographs, and no independent witnesses to corroborate his discovery. The site he identified is now covered by a bus station, making any follow-up investigation nearly impossible. For his supporters, Wyatt was a visionary who uncovered divine truth, while for his detractors, he was a master of fabrication. His story highlights a critical tension in the search for the Ark, the powerful human desire for a definitive answer often colliding with a complete absence of proof. This very lack of proof has driven a more scientific, if equally challenging, approach. Since traditional excavation is forbidden on the Temple Mount, researchers have turned to non-invasive technologies to see through the stone. Ground-penetrating radar has become the tool of choice, a method that sends high-frequency radio waves into the ground and maps the returning signals to create a three-dimensional image of subsurface structures. It is like giving the Earth an X-ray, revealing hidden chambers, tunnels, and voids without ever breaking ground. Several surveys have been conducted around the periphery of the mount, mapping the intricate network of cisterns and passages that lie beneath. One notable scan even identified a previously unknown void deep beneath the platform's surface, a discovery that immediately sparked speculation. Could this be the legendary chamber of the Ark? The frustrating answer is that ground-penetrating radar can reveal the shape of a space, but it cannot tell you what is inside it. That dark patch on a researcher's screen could be the hiding place of a sacred relic, a natural geological formation, or simply an empty, forgotten storage room from the Crusader period. The technology provides a tantalizing glimpse, a map of possibilities, but it cannot offer confirmation. This leaves us in a strange limbo, knowing there are secrets beneath our feet but unable to reach out and touch them. The high-tech prospecting continues, with each new scan adding another layer of data to the mystery. yet the final truth remains locked away, visible only as an echo on a screen, a ghost in the machine of history. That cinematic power surge did not emerge from a vacuum. In 1981, a film permanently rewired how the world imagined the Ark of the Covenant. Steven Spielberg's Raiders of the Lost Ark presented a version of the artifact that was at once thrillingly fictional and strangely faithful to its ancient aura of danger. The movie depicted the Ark as a radiant superweapon, a divine radio that could be tuned to communicate with God, but which would unleash cataclysmic fury upon the unworthy. This was a brilliant, Hollywood-heightened version of the biblical stories, where the Ark toppled walls and struck down those who touched it improperly. The film's climax, where Nazi faces melt and heads explode from the unleashed divine energy, is a direct, if spectacularly exaggerated, parallel to the story of Uzzah being struck down for his irreverent touch. The movie took the object's inherent, terrifying holiness and translated it into visceral, blockbuster spectacle. This single film did more than any academic paper or history book to sear the Ark's image into the global consciousness. It transformed an obscure biblical relic into a pop culture icon, a tangible treasure at the end of a thrilling adventure. Suddenly, the Ark was not just a subject for theologians and archaeologists. It was a prize that audiences around the world felt they understood on an emotional level. The movie's massive success sparked a renewed wave of public fascination, sending a new generation of treasure hunters and researchers back to the ancient texts with fresh eyes. It created a powerful, lasting association between the Ark and high-stakes adventure, framing its recovery not just as a historical discovery, but as the ultimate quest. Yet this popular depiction also created a lasting distortion. For millions, the Ark is now forever linked to melting Nazis and glowing, ghostly fury, a depiction that, while rooted in the idea of divine power, overshadows the artifact's deeper theological role as the seat of mercy and the heart of a covenant. Spielberg gave us an arc of terrifying conclusion, while the biblical arc was one of ongoing relationship. This cultural phenomenon raises a fascinating question. Has the fictional quest to find the Ark in a movie made it harder, or perhaps easier, for us to recognize the true artifact if it were ever actually found? The discovery of the Ark would send a seismic shock through the foundations of the world's major faiths, each interpreting its return through a different theological lens. In Judaism, the Ark is intrinsically linked to the Holy of Holies and the future Third Temple. Its recovery would be seen by many as a powerful signal that the time for rebuilding is at hand, a direct divine endorsement for restoring the center of worship. Yet this very prospect would ignite intense debate. Who has the authority to handle such a sacred object? Which sect would oversee its placement? The potential need to reconstruct the temple on the Temple Mount, a site now occupied by the Dome of the Rock and Al-Aqsa Mosque, moves the question from theological speculation into a sphere of immense global tension. For many Christians, the Ark is a powerful foreshadowing of Jesus Christ, with the mercy seat prefiguring his role as the ultimate atonement. Its physical rediscovery could be viewed as a stunning confirmation of biblical accuracy, a tangible link to the Old Testament that validates the entire scriptural narrative. However, some branches of Christian theology might see its return as a complication, wondering if it shifts focus from the new covenant of grace back to the old covenant of law. Within Islam, the Ark, known as Tabat Sakina, is revered as a sacred relic sent to the Israelites, mentioned in the Quran as a sign of God's authority and a source of spiritual peace. Its discovery on land considered holy to Muslims would demand reverence, but also raise urgent questions about its custody and the implications for the status of Jerusalem. The central and most volatile question is one of ownership and location. The competing claims are not merely academic, they are deeply woven into each faith's identity and prophecy. Would the Ark's return be a unifying miracle, a divine sign calling for interfaith respect? or would it become the ultimate prize in a tragic struggle, fracturing the very peace it was meant to symbolize? The power of the Ark has always been double-edged, capable of both uniting a people and striking down those who approach it with the wrong intention. In the modern world, that power would test not just individual faith, but the very ability of civilizations to share a common history and a common planet. Perhaps the greatest power of the Ark is its enduring absence. We are drawn to this void, this empty space in history, precisely because it offers no final answer. A definitive discovery, whether in a chapel in Axum or a cave in Jerusalem, would bring a certain kind of closure, but it would also end the quest. The mystery itself is the engine of our fascination. It allows every generation to project its own hopes, its own fears, and its own questions onto this golden chest. For the faithful, it is a test of belief, a tangible promise waiting to be fulfilled. For the historian, it is the ultimate cold case, a puzzle with fragments of evidence scattered across continents and millennia. And for the adventurer, it represents the last great treasure hunt, a story where maps are drawn from ancient texts and X marks a spot that could be anywhere. This single object sits at a perfect crossroads, where the spiritual yearning to connect with the divine meets the intellectual thrill of solving an ancient riddle. It bridges the sacred and the secular, inviting both prayer and ground-penetrating radar. We are not just searching for a relic, we are searching for a connection to our own past, for a key that might unlock not only a chamber of gold, but a deeper understanding of our shared human story. What does it say about us that we are still looking, that after 2,500 years, the silence surrounding a lost box still speaks so loudly? The Ark's true legacy may not be its power to strike down armies, but its power to keep us forever wondering, forever searching, and forever captivated by the possibility that just beyond our reach, something truly miraculous is waiting. Each of these paths offers a compelling vision, yet each is paved with its own unique obstacles. The idea of the Ark resting in a hidden chamber beneath Jerusalem is perhaps the most intuitive, satisfying our sense that the answer must lie at the very heart of the mystery. The logic is sound, the ancient traditions are powerful, and the very ground beneath the Temple Mount is known to be a labyrinth of secrets. Yet this theory is forever trapped by the modern world's political and religious realities, a solution locked in a box for which there is no key. The Ethiopian claim stands as its polar opposite, a story not of loss but of transfer, backed by an unbroken and vibrant faith that has defined a nation. Its evidence is not archaeological but spiritual, and its power lies in the fact that for millions the question is not a mystery at all, but a settled truth. The challenge here is the absolute lack of empirical verification, placing it in a realm beyond the reach of historical proof. Then there is the stark possibility of the Babylonian smelter, a theory that appeals not to romance but to cold, hard pragmatism. It explains the silence in the records with brutal efficiency, but it offers no hope and extinguishes the very flame of the quest. The Lemba tradition and the story of the Ngoma Lungun do present a radical reinterpretation, suggesting the Ark was not a static object but a living power that could be transferred and transformed. It bridges faith and forensics with genetics and oral history, yet the physical evidence is a shattered drum, a poignant relic that speaks more of a spiritual successor than the original golden chest. The Knights Templar weave the Ark into a tapestry of medieval conspiracy and hidden history, a secret that could explain their meteoric rise and tragic fall. It is a story of guardianship and esoteric knowledge, but one that remains shrouded in the same shadows that cloak the Order itself, relying on inference and legend rather than a tangible trail. And finally, the prophetic hiding on Mount Nebo offers a divinely ordained conclusion, a promise of a future revelation that places the Ark's fate entirely in the hands of God. It is the one theory that cannot be disproven because its very premise is that it was meant to remain beyond human discovery. So where does this leave us? We are surrounded by a chorus of possibilities, each singing a different song with conviction. Perhaps the true nature of this ancient enigma is not to be solved, but to be contemplated, forcing us to decide what we value more, the cold certainty of evidence or the warm power of belief. The search for the Ark of the Covenant, in the end, may be missing the point entirely. We have chased it through ancient texts and across continents, through genetic codes and ground-penetrating radar, hoping to find a box of gold and acacia wood. But perhaps its greatest power was never contained within its physical form. The Ark's true legacy is the story itself, a narrative that has captivated humanity for millennia. It is a symbol of an unbreakable covenant, a vessel for our deepest yearning to touch the divine. This golden chest, whether real or remembered, has become a mirror reflecting our own endless quest for meaning, for answers that lie just beyond the edge of history. Its enduring mystery invites every one of us to become part of its story. So we leave you with this final thought: which of these paths speaks to you? Does your mind lean toward the hidden chamber beneath Jerusalem, or does your heart believe in the faithful guardian in Axum? Are you convinced by the stark reality of the Babylonian smelter, or captivated by the transformed drum of the Lemba people? The conversation does not end here, it continues with you. We would be fascinated to know which theory captures your imagination. Share your thoughts in the comments below and become part of this ancient, ongoing